Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. I'm Jer Stays, and joining me virtually is...
Fletcher Sharp.
It's good to talk with you, sir.
Likewise.
Now, there is a lot to unpack. Now, we're off-season for a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of a slow time, but there is sports news that I think we should get into. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is the USFL coming to Detroit. Both the Michigan Panthers and the Philadelphia Stars will be using Ford Field as their home field as this league kind of expands out. It's an 8-team league, kind of plays on an opposite season of the NFL. You know, Fletcher, what's your read on this? Because you actually went down to Ford Field, got a real vibe for everything that's happening. There was a press conference even involving the mayor of the city of Detroit, which frankly I was a little bit surprised about, but there was a lot of push around this thing. And I feel like I hear two camps. One that's like, this is going to be a bust and nobody's going to watch. The other, which is like, hey, you know what? People are obsessed with football. More football in town is great. You look at the games from the NFL, even neutral site games. People showed up to watch neutral site games because Metro Detroit is obsessed with football. Thoughts, Fletcher?
Originally, when we got the request to head down there for a press conference, I was like, all right, whatever. I'll go and it'll be something, nice. Maybe a few bottles of water, maybe a few people standing around, a high five and talk real quick and we'll be done. But when I got there and saw almost all of Michigan media covering it, Fox Sports was there covering it, obviously because they have some part in it. Kurt Menefee was there to speak on it from Fox Sports. Daryl Moose Johnston, also there from Fox Sports, there to talk about it. The mayor was there, which I was like, all right, well, if he's here, clearly he believes in it. He doesn't just show up to stuff that he thinks is gonna fail. A lot of major media, I won't name names, but a lot of major media who people follow on Twitter for sports stuff were also there. So I was like, all right, this is actually a pretty big deal. A lot of people spoke. Kurt Menefee was thanking the governor. They tried to get Charles Woodson to show up, but they called him soft because he's in Miami. He's not used to the Michigan winters anymore. Ha. But this is a thing that everyone spoke about. And even looking on social media, Philadelphia fans are like, I can't get to every single game at Ford Field, but I'd like to come to some of the home games and support some players. And that says something because Philadelphia is not close. It's not like you're going to Chicago. It's quite a ways away in that very flat, long, weird shaped state. People seem to be very excited about it. And family friendly for a football game, I guess, $25 a ticket. I'm sure the concessions will be open for a lot of Ford Field. I'm sure that maybe not the entire Ford Field. I don't think they expect to get 60,000. Although I will say I was going to ask a question and it got answered for me. Everyone seems very excited about selling out. The championship game that happened down in Birmingham when everyone was playing at the same stadium, they're like, that game sold out. I know Birmingham wasn't in it because they were not that great. People are very excited for this team, and I thought they might not be because I know the pool selection of players typically is from local colleges, players who might have gone pro and then not kind of done so well and then come back to play locally, and it's like, oh, you can go play for the Michigan Panthers. So you might see players who played at Michigan, Michigan State, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, maybe even Michigan Tech if you're lucky. Just a bunch of local names who you might see and be like, oh, wow, that guy. I was stunned at how many people stayed around to ask questions, take pictures, and really, really fully believe in this movement. I know the Midwest, Michigan especially, are very football crazy with Michigan, Michigan State, even the Lions being bad. I'm still kind of stunned at how eager people were to ask questions about it afterwards. People were very much like, oh yeah, I'm all for this.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the mother may I step back question on this because I know we have listeners who are going, what is the USFL?
The USFL is the United States Football League. It is, a rebirth of the old USFL, which used to run it for a few more teams. If it sounds familiar, they had a documentary about it where a former president owned one of the teams and actually helped bankrupt the league. I'm sure you can guess which president that is. It's kind of like the second division of football. Originally, they tried to compete with the NFL, which is just...
That's not going to happen.
No, even in the 60s and 70s, that wasn't going to happen. So definitely not now. It's not going to happen. But, there's still some quality play. Last year, Michigan's team was not that great. They only beat one other team, and that was Pittsburgh team. Only won one game. There might be some tough sledding at times, but it's still the American game that people love a lot. My only caveat that makes me worry about the Michigan Panthers is their head coach is Jeff Fisher, who, as most NFL circles will know, is like Mr. 500. It's very hard to go 8-8 in a season, and he's done it like 9 times in his career, which is honestly impressive. Given the fact that he had a really good season with like Tennessee and then all bunch of really bad seasons, the fact that he's still around 500 is like a testament to itself. Like, if you want people to show up and watch some 8-8 football, Jeff Fisher's your number one call. So I'm a little worried about that because that type of juju kind of follows you from wherever you go. So here's to hoping that he breaks it so that Michigan Panthers can have a pretty good season. And I spoke to Kurt Menefee afterwards, and he was like, yeah, Detroit is a football-rich city. He's like, people have stuck by the Lions for quite some time. And he's like, at Fox, we can see exactly what. They have not been good for quite some time, but the fans are just as vocal as any of the other fan bases. So, like, lets you know how much people really care. People care a lot. And if they can care a lot for a football team that like isn't good for a while and now recently got good and get louder for it, I'm sure they can care for this other team that's going to be taking place during a different season. And that's the part that people have to realize is this season does not run concurrently with the NFL. It's a spring-summer season. So their first game will be April 30th at Ford Field against Philadelphia, which is a Sunday. You'll be able to concurrently watch football. That's the goal that the USFL wants is you can watch this, then go to the NFL, then the NFL ends, and then when the NFL ends, maybe a month or two, and then all of a sudden USFL again. Like they want it to be football, kind of how football is in the southern states, football forever.
Well, I am excited to see some of the games. And, Ford Field has a new turf that apparently is going to be a big improvement over what the past was. And I can't stop thinking about the conversation we had with PR expert Matt Friedman, who also has done a ton of sports. Like did sports reporting back in the day himself. And he shared how, at least in Metro Detroit, football dominates everything. And it's because that's what people talk about. That's what people call in for. That's what people get excited about. And, in some cities, I might be like, yeah, this might not get as much grip, but I'm really starting to think that it's going to be a thing here. And, I saw how many people were excited about those out-of-market games. And, Ford Field has gotten a lot of plaudits over the years for being a great neutral site for teams because of the facilities.
I mean, yeah, like, again, not to keep hammering on the same point, but when I first walked up for the press conference or even got the notification, I'm like, all right, we're going to go into the little atrium. It's going to be a nice little, intimate setting. Maybe 20 other media people, maybe some VIP people, maybe grab, a piece of fruit and then you're on your way. But like, no, they had like the full on dessert cart, full on make your own coffee, however you want with extra 7 types of creams and what, like they were full on like, yes, we have a bunch of people here. Take a gift bag with a t-shirt and a hat and a football as you go. We're full on into this. We really want this. And there are people who are just like, yeah, what is this? I'm excited about this. I'm excited to watch the Panthers at home as opposed to watching them on television. This is a good thing happening. I was kind of floored, especially because 1, they weren't good last year, and 2, the talent pool, especially in this country, whose people are like, if it's not number 1 league, I don't care about it. If it's not the top division, I don't care. People were like, yeah, I mean, it's football. Like, it might not be number 1 football. It might not be the NFL of football, but, like, it's still football, and it's still people I know. I want to go watch it. I wish them the best. We will be keeping an eye on them this season. Hopefully they can do better than last year, because people will probably still show up, but we don't need, 2 seasons of booing in a row. That's not really fun.
That's not fun at all. One thing I will say is that I am glad that it is not on Saturdays. As far as the casual fan and like maybe even pulling away from Detroit City FC, when it comes to the casual fan, I'm not talking about the hardcore fan, because the hardcore fan, a lot of them don't even care about American football. But I think when it comes to casuals, I think it's a really good thing that they're on Sundays, and Detroit City, for the most part, seems to be on Saturdays.
Yeah, if it came to head-to-head and say Detroit City was having a rough part of the season and Michigan Panthers having a rough part of the season, I'm fairly certain people would go to the stadium that, not to be mean, is not a high school football stadium. I'm fairly certain that they would probably make that choice 10 out of 10 times, which is unfortunate if they had to go head-to-head. Even though one might have a more festive atmosphere, some people just don't want fireworks. They just want to sit there, watch the game, eat their hot dog, and yell at the referees.
Right. I mean, we're really talking about casuals here, right? Like, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about supporters. We're not talking about people who've been there. We're talking about casuals, which to me kind of like is that like 2,000 fan variance like in the season last year, because we had some sellout games, and then you had a bunch of games that were like, what was it? Like in the 5s and like low 6s.
I'm not talking about the guy who's next to the press box with the big Bertha flag. No.
Or the bubble guy.
It'll be like fire and like hailstones, and he'll still be out there with that flag, like, let's go, yelling at every single person. I'm talking about the people who might want to show up with their 2 or 3 friends from out of town who want something to do on the weekend, or this guy who's coming with his, his 2 kids looking to do something fun for a sporting event, or someone trying to impress someone by taking them on a date at a sporting event. Maybe they might pivot to something else instead.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So it's really good they're not going head to head, because then it puts the stress on now one of these teams has to do well, because if they don't, one of them does not do well, the other will get buried in attendance.
Yeah. I mean, the affordability of both these clubs is good too. That's the other thing that I think is a win, right? You're not going to be spending $300 a ticket. You could easily go to both games for less than like a decent ticket at some other sporting events, or say like a Lions game or something. You go to both.
But you might not be able to eat, because I still don't know what the concessions in Ford Field are. And the last time I went to a game at Ford Field for concessions, I was debating cutting off my hand to get a few hot dogs. So.
I'm sure the USFL people will be listening to this, so get us that concessions list, all right? I know our audience. They love food. Let's move on, talk about the Lions a little bit. There isn't much to say, but there was something I thought was interesting in the hot take mill. In, of course, Pro Football Talks, Mike Florio never disappoints with this kind of thing. And his point was Tom Brady to the Detroit Lions. I've got thoughts, but I'll throw it to you first.
You know that feeling when you have a pet and you go to check on them and you discover that they made an accident on themselves, and you smell it, and that feeling your face makes?
Yeah.
That's the feeling I have hearing what you just said. Like, my face made such an ugly face. Short answer, the Lions don't need Divorce Dad to come and become the rebound for them. They don't need that. No. He can show up and play if you're like, oh, yeah, we're one piece away from winning the championship, and that's a quarterback. The Lions are not one piece away from winning a championship. It's not the quarterback. Jared Goff, at his current state, and I know I'm going to get laughed at and maybe kicked for this, Jared Goff at his current state is better than Tom Brady in his current state. 100%, cards on the table. I'd rather have a rookie come in and do something than turn it over to Tom Brady, who is going to try to change everything to be his own way. And when he leaves, after making a crater for his own self and only him, it's going to maybe isolate some other things. I don't want that energy here. We watched Tampa Bay, and yes, they ended up somehow making a better roster than need be, but I don't want that here. No, no, no. Can you see Tom Brady listening to the craziness that is Dan Campbell? Like, in all seriousness, can you see that guy who yells at his lineman about some like small ticky-tacky stuff, listening to a guy who's like, we're going to bite kneecaps, and like singing in press? Can you know? He's going to, no way. No.
Right, because Tom Brady needs to be the show, and Dan Campbell, in some ways, is the show. You know, Jamal Williams a little bit for sure is definitely, very public, and I hope he gets re-signed and brought back. But Dan Campbell is the show in Detroit. And if Tom Brady shows up, you got 2 people who are going to try to be the show, and that's just a bad idea in any organization. That's just a bad idea. And the Lions are not one piece away. They are many pieces away. I am positive on their season for next year. I very much am. But that doesn't mean that I think they are that one magical key. And the other thing is that I'm not convinced that you need a A-list quarterback to win a championship, or at least make the playoffs. Like, you can have a serviceable quarterback and a good team around him, and I think that's going to pay off a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all for selling out to get one player to come and to make things right for you. Like when the Rams got Matt Stafford there, they were literally 1 or 2 pieces away from winning a title.
But they knew the deal they were going to make.
Yeah.
They knew they were going to tank the next season.
One of them was a quarterback. One of them was a defensive player. They got the 2 pieces they needed, and all of a sudden they took off. So if the Lions do that, after having so much young talent they're building off of and mortgaging all that to do so, it's going to be so bad. So not good. This is not the young Tom Brady or the mid-aged Tom Brady who could take like Rashay Caldwell and turn him into like an NFL star for like a few years. This is not the guy who can take like any receiver who he wants to and figure something out with it. This is a guy who needs things perfectly set up for him. And if it's not perfectly set up for him, he will complain until the coaches get fired, or he'll just not give all the effort he needs. I know a lot of Michigan people are like, Tom Brady, of course. No, thank you, please. He's got some other stuff he needs to worry about right now, man. Not football. Like, he needs to look inward for a minute and like sort some stuff out. I don't need him coming to the Lions trying to be like, oh, I can sort it out here. And then we have this big media circus drama following them around everywhere they go, like it happened in Tampa. Now I got to learn about his personal life way more than I want to, and I'll have to learn even more so because he'll be in this state, so you won't be able to run away from it. No, we're good. Like, you can take your TMZ show somewhere else, please. Like, figure that stuff out. Maybe come back after that, or just maybe retire because you're at an age where you could retire and it's okay.
I will bet my future on Dan Campbell over Tom Brady any day. It's not even close. Not even close in my mind. All right. Let's finish out with a little Detroit City FC. There aren't really many more announcements to talk about. There were some staffing additions with the women's team, which we can link to in the show notes. Just very kind of basic stuff. But a couple of listeners forwarded this to me from friend of the show, John Morrissey, who has been on before, and I'm sure will be on again. He is USLTactics on Twitter. And the quote is, "My big takeaway is that the East is going to be brutal and that I'm positive about most off seasons around the USL. The issue with that positivity, my friend, is that in the winners tier, as far as the offseason, there are Eastern Conference mates Charleston, Tulsa, Indy, and Tampa Bay. And down in the bottom tier, there's Detroit City FC, as far literally labeled losers when it comes to the offseason. Couple people were a little upset about this. Couple people were like, hey, this isn't fair, at least to me. I think this validates some of the concerns that I have going into this offseason. Still have a lot of faith in Trevor James, but all those teams mentioned, they have made some pretty big offseason moves.
I understand being a fan and seeing someone in the media spotlight call your team a loser. It stings a bit. I'm not even going to lie. Being called a loser in any capacity can sting. By an analytics person who understands the ins and outs of the league from a global perspective, not just, one region, who watches most games and has feedback for almost every single game, who's actually a fan of the club, for him to be like, yeah, they lost this offseason, it stings. But to be fair to him, he's not wrong on paper, at least. I can't speak for, the future. But on paper, what DCFC has is they made the playoffs last year as the last seed. With a very small roster that they said would not be as small the following year. They lost their leading goal scorer, which isn't much of a loss considering where his goals came from. A lot of his goals came against not the best teams.
And let's be honest, he wasn't a system fit. I expect him to do a lot better in Las Vegas than he did here.
Yeah, he wasn't a system fit. That's fine. So losing him, we'll call that a net 0. But you lost the league's leading assist person, which is a net loss. You lost your starting left back, who's your only international level player playing for New Zealand. That's a net loss. You haven't really added much in terms of overall. You added the comeback player of the year from USL League One, added a few bench players from other teams. One of your starting center backs, you hope to be back, has not got the process of the timetable back to be back yet. Devin Wimensa.
We're not starting the season with him, are we?
I mean, he tore an ACL before, tore an ACL. Now he has 2 torn ACLs, one in each knee. He's rehabbing. If he does, it'll be in a bench capacity till he's ready to play. But I don't expect to see him on the field against San Diego. ACLs are very tricky. It's something I don't want to speculate on. If it feels like a broken bone or something, I'd have a much easier time speculating than I would for a ligament injury because those can heal all types of weird ways. I'm not saying I'm down and out. I'm not saying that they're going to be the worst team in the East, but every other team in the East has gotten better, save for Loudoun, who they have their own issues they're worrying about. But every single team that they were all just about better than, Miami, Tulsa, Charleston, Indy, all have gotten better.
What about the idea that we don't need a big scorer? One listener said that, maybe this team doesn't need a 10-goal scorer.
I don't believe that. And the reason why I don't believe that is the way Trevor plays. It's kind of a variation of Route 1 soccer. Route 1 is essentially kind of like driving on the freeway where it's one direct way. It's very, whatever. It's the ball goes from the back to the front very quickly. So a long, deep pass front to somebody who holds the ball up, who then gives it to somebody else, who then tries to make plays for somebody else. Trevor plays a system that's kind of like that. It's not directly to the hold-up guy in the middle. It's more of the ball goes to the wings, and then the wings go up the field, then it goes to somebody who crosses into the middle. If you don't have someone who can just even tap in 10 goals a season, or you just, little mistake goals, people are not going to mark that person anymore. They're going to leave him alone. They're going to say, that person's there. He's not doing anything. He's not creating runs. He's just negative space. Leave him alone. We'll focus on somebody else. Pato and Yazid both served a purpose where when they were not scoring, they just kind of got in the way, which allowed Hopino to make runs, which allowed Reese and Declan to make runs and make crosses, which allowed them to find the late run of Maxi Rodriguez, who is typically at the box by himself to tap in some goals. If you don't have a guy to focus on, who is going to be the guy who like takes out a lot of that coverage, at least who can put the ball in the net, they leave him alone. They're like, all right, well, he's going to make his run. It's definitely not going to him because he sucks. So let's look at somebody else whose the ball might go to. It creates problems. Not having someone like Hopino there to make those runs, you're hoping that Adrian Billhart or Skage can take up that run. You're hoping Connor makes some improvements in his offensive game to where he can kind of be more on the ball scorer and not just a guy who comes in late to head the ball in. So like you're hoping that some things kind of mature and, evolve in this sense. But also like sometimes you don't teach old dogs new tricks because they don't learn. We've seen what some players can do. The news players we're still learning about, but the old players that are still there, we kind of know what they can do. And I understand people saying we don't need these things. You got to trust in Trevor. To their point, Trevor has not had a season with Detroit where he has not done something that made the fans say this was a good season. He's not had a bad season for Detroit. So far, he should still have some trust in him. But I'd be a little worried because, Nisa, you can expect to not have much. You can scrape by 1 year, your first year in the league to make the playoffs. But like following that, you don't want to be scraping by anymore. You want to start to build and become a team that people, don't want to play because they're scared.
Well, Fletcher Sharp, it is so good to talk to you. Thanks for the honest feedback, and I'm excited for sports in Detroit. This should be an interesting year, to say the least, my friend.
I am too, and honestly, I really hope. I know people get on me at times saying that can be negative. I don't think it's negativity. I think it's more of a realist approach. A situation like this, I hope I'm wrong. I hope come into the season, there's a home playoff game at Keyworth, and we're there to cover it, and people are like, look at you, you said this wouldn't happen. I'm like, you know what? I was very much wrong, and you were right, and now let's turn to watch this game.
With that, I'm J.R. Stays.
And I'm Fletcher Sharp.
As always, feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. We will be back tomorrow, as we are every day, with your Daily Detroit podcast. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.